coming. Today we have our very own Robin Brewer. She's a presidential postdoc in SI. She comes to us originally from Northwestern, where she did her PhD. She's done work in accessibility, for example, things like voice-based interfaces for older adults. And so take it away, Robin.
All right, thank you. All right. So again, my name is Robin. I am a new postdoc here. I just started in August. So there are some of you who I have met, others who I've known before, and others who I have not yet met. So as traditional in academic talks, I will be describing myself through a series of Venn diagrams. I came from Northwestern University, as Matt said, and there I was in a kind of weird joint PhD program called Technology and Social Behavior. So in my research, I ask both interesting technical research questions and then also interesting social research questions, and I'll be describing that a bit more. But more specifically, my research focuses on these three areas: accessibility, motivation, and online communities. So I ask how older adults and people with disabilities are motivated to engage in different types of online communities, and how we can better design not only online communities but new technology to be accessible to these populations. Okay, so that's a very general outline of the type of work that I do. And I want to start off this talk by asking one question, and that is, how do you internet? Okay, mysterious, right? How do you internet? Internet is not a verb, I know, but let's just think about the ways in which we use the internet. And so you might think about the many devices that you use to access the internet. You might think about accessing internet on a laptop or a smartphone or a gaming console. You might think about the specific activities you do on these devices, like use Facebook or check email or binge watch Netflix, which is something that I do often. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to be presenting a series of studies for how older adults are engaging online. And when I say older adult, I mean adults over the age of 65 years old. So I'm going to preface by acknowledging that there are many thoughts that may arise when I say older adults and technology. You might think about how you have friends or family members over the age of 65 who are actively engaging online, or you may have these perceptions of seniors maybe being confused or frustrated or not knowing how to use technology. And so it's important to preface this talk by recognizing that the word senior or the phrase older adult refers to a very diverse group of people. I'm going to start off with great news, and that is that we see that older adults are using the internet more than ever before, and this is data from a recent Pew Internet report. You see there's an increase in 2004 where 24% of seniors were online, to go into the most recent report in 2016 where 67% of seniors are online, which is great. Right? So we see these other statistics where 80% of seniors own a cell phone, which is great news. However, only 42% are able to access the internet on their phones, or 42% on a smartphone. See that 51% have in-home internet access, but of this 51%, only 28% over the age of 80 have this access. And then of the 34% using social media, only 23% have a household income of less than $30,000. So this is showing that although there's a growth in how many seniors are online, there are disparities that exist even amongst this older adult demographic, and these disparities affect technology use. So today I'm going to talk about both sides of the coin in terms of online engagement. So I'm going to talk about my research on seniors who are currently engaging online, asking what's meaningful about these forms of online engagement. And then I'll describe a study looking at lack of participation and why older adults are not participating in certain online communities. And then lastly, I'll describe my work and how to bridge this gap in engagement between those who are engaging online and those who aren't through development. So this last project focuses on how technology can facilitate accessible and meaningful online interaction, specifically for older adults who face barriers to internet access and use. Okay. So I'm going to start off by highlighting a theory that is central to the work that I'm going to be discussing today, and that is Carstenson's socio-emotional selectivity theory. And this theory states that our goals change as a function of perception. So the x-axis here is how we perceive ourselves to be near the end of life, whether we perceive ourselves to be far from the end of life or near to the end of life. And so as we perceive ourselves to be near the end of life, this theory states that our social motives change from a focus on knowledge and information seeking to seeking more emotionally fulfilling relationships and interactions. And so while this graph may lead you to believe that older adults are on the far right side of the axis, this x-axis, going through the three studies that I outlined will challenge these assumptions a little bit and show how seniors are much more complex. Right? So I'll get back to that at the end, but just keep that in mind. So findings from prior research suggest that older adults see online communities like Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat as superficial because these sites don't help them to develop these emotionally fulfilling relationships. Informed by this work, researchers have developed tools to make social networking sites and different online communities more meaningful to seniors by focusing on online engagement with family members, where they can view family photos or read different family updates. And so this is something that you might think about on a Facebook timeline if you have an older family member who's able to see your updates or photos. But viewing photos and updates means that there's this focus on helping seniors consume content. And so what about the ways that seniors might actively engage online and participate online? So this first study, I am looking at existing engagement and what's meaningful about this. And I'm looking at engagement because research has shown that there are many benefits to online and offline engagement for seniors. I see some smiling faces in the audience. These are stock photos from the internet, so they're very interesting in the way that they portray seniors with technology, so this person is very happy. And so looking at online and offline engagement, specifically for seniors, it's been associated with positive health outcomes like a decrease in depression. Offline, creative forms of expression are associated with reduced loneliness and increased morale for older adults. And so thinking about how there are creative forms of offline expression that are helpful, I sought to look at creative forms of online expression for seniors. And one type of creative form of online engagement which has been shown to provide benefits to other populations is blogging. And blogging for people with a desire to lose weight or people who have chronic diseases, blogging has been shown to provide a supportive community because these are populations who may feel isolated or have some need for community. Therefore, I set out to examine how older adults are participating in expression through blogging and investigate the role of blogging as a case of online engagement. And to do this, I conducted interviews with existing older adult bloggers. There were hundreds of them that I found just through a simple search online, but then I also recruited more through snowball sampling on blog rolls. And so blog rolls are the lists, if you're not familiar, are lists typically on the sides of blogs that list who people follow or blogs that people are interested in. And so I conducted remote interviews with existing older adult bloggers on what they blog about, their topics, how they blog, do they have a specific process that they follow, why they blog, so why they got started blogging and why they continue to blog, and also any challenges that they encountered while blogging. So I was able to recruit and interview 20 senior bloggers, and this is not intended for you to read in detail, but it's just to highlight the variety and the diversity of participants in terms of age, their experience with blogging, their blogging topics, and even how many blogs someone authored. A few authored more than one blog. And so I'll just describe some of the key themes that arose from this study. And one of them showed how blogging fosters self-expression that supports seniors' values of depth of thought. And so the people I interviewed saw blogging platforms as spaces for serious, meaningful expression because they could speak at length on topics that they thought were important, which they contrasted to sites like Facebook. So this participant said, I go into much more depth when I post a blog. It's something more in depth than anything I would put on Facebook. And so they were describing how they saw Facebook as a space that was only valued for maybe short updates as opposed to long updates, where some of these blog posts were 5-6 paragraphs long. They didn't think, and probably appropriately so, didn't think that people would be interested in reading this type of depth of thought on Facebook. And this aligns somewhat to prior work where seniors are reporting that they perceive sites like Facebook as superficial. But we see that they're ascribing meaning to other online platforms like blogging that allows them to express themselves at depth. And this also aligns to some work on context collapse, where these seniors enjoyed being able to separate their blogging audience from family members and friends who were on Facebook. Due to this kind of separation of audience, they describe their blogs as a safe space for expressing opinions on taboo topics. And so one participant has a political blog, and she says that she's not quite so political offline. When I grew up, there were 3 things you didn't discuss: money, politics, and religion. And so blogging was seen as this great platform where she could finally express her opinions on topics that she valued, which might not align with these generational expectations that we have. And more importantly, the process of blogging provided a supportive community for these seniors. Yes?
That's a clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
They were using their real names?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I should mention that they were recruited where they were using their names, their email, and they listed their email on their blog and had some type of sign that they were over the age of 65, that they were an older adult. Yeah. But speaking of community, these blogs and blogging communities provided a space for seniors who might feel isolated or lonely, which is it aligns with why other age groups blog. But these seniors express that their family members have started to move away and maybe start their own families, or that their friends may have started to pass away, and so they were seeking new outlets for social support. And one participant said, "This has kept me from being isolated. When I'm lonely or I'm upset about my husband's Alzheimer's, I can go on the blog. I feel like I'm with friends, even though they are not right here. It's better than having someone from here." So they were describing how at times their remote blogging communities could be better or more supportive even than their local support networks that they had. So just to give a brief overview, and the rest of the findings of this work can be found in a Kite paper that was published last year. But overall, for these seniors who are active bloggers, blogging allows them to express themselves on meaningful topics at length to a supportive community of peers. Yet this engagement is not representative of seniors participating in online communities. And I want to shift gears and study too to examining this lack of participation within the online crowd workspace. And I'll explain why, but raise your hand if you've heard of crowd work or crowdsourcing. Okay, there's a majority, but not all, I see. So for those who are unaware, crowd work is a form of work where people complete jobs for some type of incentive, usually financial incentive. And the task can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours to complete, and then the money that a crowd worker earns depends on the task length and complexity. And so this is a screenshot of Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is one of the most popular crowd work platforms for generalized crowd work tasks where you don't necessarily need to be an expert in one particular area or have an interest in one particular area to complete the task. And it's a unique community from which to study online participation of older adults because it's unlike community studied in research for older adults, where it tends to be a focus on communities where they can interact with family members or friends. And Mechanical Turk is mostly anonymous. And it's also not this very health-based forum or health-based platform, which tends to be among the interests of many researchers when it comes to older adults and participating in online communities. But crowd work is also important because it's an important labor market around the world. Yet most crowd workers tend to be pretty similar. So if you aren't aware, many crowd workers are from the US and from India, and they tend to be in the same age group. So the most recent reports show that more than 50% of workers are under the age of 30 years old, while only 5% of workers are over the age of 60 years old. And this was from a report on a different platform called Crowdflower, but there are other trends on sites like Amazon's Mechanical Turk where very few seniors are completing crowd work. So I wanted to study this lack of participation and engagement and understand motivation for completing, or more so not completing, crowd work tasks, which led me to a few different questions. So the first was, are seniors who are online even aware that crowd work exists? And if so, who participates? Two, for those who do participate, what would motivate them to do so? And for those who don't, or for those who do participate, what motivates them to do so? And for those who don't, what would motivate them to do so? And three, how do seniors actually complete tasks? For those who are crowd workers, they must be completing tasks in some way. Do they encounter any challenges to doing so? Could this be why there's this lack of participation? So how are seniors completing tasks? And for this question, I focused on the platform Amazon's Mechanical Turk. So I collaborated with a colleague at Microsoft Research, and we started by first surveying older adults to learn about their knowledge of and their interest in crowd work. And so a third-party surveying company, which conducted census representative sampling, was able to recruit over 500 seniors over the age of 60 in the United States to complete the survey. And again, in the survey, we focus on familiarity of crowd work and actual and perceived motivation. So why would they complete, or why do they complete crowd work tasks? And initially, I considered that seniors might not be crowd workers because they aren't aware that these opportunities exist. And the survey results validated this because they showed that even amongst an online and fairly tech-savvy group of seniors, so they had all signed up to complete online surveys at some point, the majority had never heard of crowd work or crowdsourcing from the definition that we provided. In fact, only 15% of participants had heard of crowd work prior to completing the survey. And then I asked about their motivation to complete tasks. So regardless of their familiarity with crowd work, we asked participants, why would you do these tasks, or why do you do these tasks? And if it's difficult to see, earning money, working on something interesting or fun, and working on something stimulating or challenging were the aspects of crowd work which prompted the strongest interest among the participants. And similar to prior work, which looks at seniors completing very specialized tasks on more citizen science platforms, our respondents were also less motivated by the social aspects of crowd work, like participating with people they knew or helping people on their projects. But, as you all know, a survey is self-report data. And much of the data was from people who had never completed crowd work tasks. So I was interested in understanding their impressions of crowd work after they completed actual crowd work tasks. So I recruited 14 older adults for interviews in their homes, and of the 14, all of them indicated that they were comfortable with using computers, but none of them had completed crowd work tasks before. And in the interviews, I asked about their technology use and their motivations and experiences, learning new skills, volunteering, and doing work more broadly. And then I asked them to complete anywhere from 3 to 5 tasks on Mechanical Turk. And after each task, I asked them to rate their level of understanding of the task, how much they enjoyed completing the task, and their likelihood to complete similar tasks in the future. Now, one perhaps not so surprising trend in the data is that participants were frustrated by unfamiliar terminology and jargon, particularly words that prevented them from completing the task. For example, one participant described the task as confusing because she said, "I don't know what all these stupid things mean." And then when I asked to explain further, these stupid things were terms like URL and transcribe and task instructions. And this is even amongst the group where participants said that they were familiar with using computers, and they all described themselves as intermediate computer users. And these challenges in completing the task led to older adults perceiving the task as something that wasn't created for them. So I don't belong on this site because these tasks were clearly created for other people. And when they said other people, I asked, okay, can you explain that? And they viewed crowd work as most appropriate for younger people or people with more formal and extensive computer training. So one participant, when asked, she said, "I think this is probably for young people who just spend all their time skulking around on the internet." So not perceiving these sites as something that was created for their kind of demographic or age group. Also, not being able to complete the task negatively affected seniors' self-efficacy. So one participant compared navigating crowd work tasks with the feeling I get when I have to deal with customer support, because she saw these tasks as being very frustrating to complete. Others described how they felt like a complete failure or feeling defeated completing the task, which may deter seniors who try to enter this crowd workspace from completing future tasks. Now, most surprising was kind of a contradiction from the survey around motivation to completing the task, where this one participant and others agreed, said that as you get older, it's more difficult to search for meaningful things to do. Your task of social importance and such, that's meaningful stuff. We all look for something like that, and that's worth getting confused about. So if you recall, in the survey, people said that they weren't interested in completing these tasks to help others, but from the interviews after they actually completed these tasks, we see that seniors were more interested in these social aspects of crowd work, and that they were seeking not only meaningful forms of participation, but they would also be willing to kind of navigate some of the usability challenges and errors if they knew that this work was helping someone or something with some task. And more details about this study can also be found in a CHI paper that was published last year. But this work suggests that requesters could benefit from making a higher level value or purpose of completing crowd work tasks clear. And I include this question of what's the point or kind of what's the purpose, because either a level of transparency or reframing the task or the purpose of the task might motivate older adults. And this could also motivate other potential crowd workers to start to engage in crowd work, or existing crowd workers to continue to complete these crowd work tasks. But broadly speaking, these two studies, the crowd work study and the blogging study, were looking at cases of online engagement for seniors who are already online. And although 90% of Americans are online, the statistics show that only 1 in 3 seniors, show that 1 in 3 seniors aren't engaging online at all, and they're doing so at significantly, for those who are online, they are engaging online at significantly lower rates than other age groups. Now, those who are offline may face a number of barriers to engaging online, which are important to note. So one of these barriers is cost. Right? So internet-enabled devices can be expensive to purchase and maintain, especially when you consider the cost of monthly Wi-Fi or data. Next, it might be difficult for someone to access a shared computer if they can't afford to have one in their homes, or for whatever reason they don't have one in their homes, especially for people with mobility impairments. And lastly, the interfaces can seem complex to users who are new to using the internet. And so just viewing this is a screenshot of the Facebook homepage, you can see that there are several menus and icons and ads, just sources of information that can distract or confuse users. So there's this gap in this space of online engagement and aging, where there are some older adults who are online and engaging online, but accessing the internet and engaging online is still a challenge for others. So in study 3, I want to look at how technology can be designed to facilitate accessible and meaningful online interaction or engagement. The researchers have made interfaces more accessible by kind of changing the form factor of the interfaces themselves. Rather than embedding different online interactions and communities into computers or smartphones, they choose to use things like picture frames or post-it notes or photo albums. And not only does this make it more accessible, but it also makes accessing the internet more familiar and culturally meaningful to older adults. And I borrow from this work a bit, rather than relying on familiar graphical-based interfaces. I am approaching this from the space of familiar audio-based interfaces. Because these graphical interfaces can be challenging for a particular group of older adults who are more likely to develop an age-related vision impairment. And so some of my prior work shows how seniors who do develop a vision impairment, whether that means their vision is blurry or they become legally blind, it shows that they are more likely to give up using technology because they're intimidated by screen readers. So I propose, instead of screen-based interfaces, looking at audio-based interfaces. Specifically, I propose using phones as this familiar interface because they're culturally meaningful for older adults. Prior work has shown how phones are seniors' primary means of communication, and that seniors find phones and interaction by phone as meaningful because they facilitate this real or this rich conversation. And then on the other side, here you see that researchers have also investigated phones in the context of providing internet access to people in developing countries through IVR, or interactive voice response. And IVR allows someone to interact with the system through voice or keypad input. And so this work has shown how IVR systems are useful for people with limited internet experience and access. So I wanted to understand more about how IVR systems can address these barriers and support the needs of seniors. So I interviewed seniors and observed how they use computers. And through this, I learned about the challenges they were having online, specifically how they desired to communicate online through email, but there were a number of barriers to them being able to do this. But although they wanted to communicate online through email, their preference was still for communicating by landline phone. So I developed a prototype of an email IVR system where users can send and receive email messages on a landline phone, and tested this prototype with older adults, which informed the development of the full system, which I call VMail, kind of like voice-based email, voice-based email. I don't know, still trying to decide what that meant. And using the findings from the prototype testing and deployed it to seniors in their homes for 4 weeks. And there are many other findings of this work that were published in a T-Access journal article last year. But overall, this deployment helped me to see the utility of IVR-based online communities. So for those who had no prior experience communicating online, their use of email was able to fill some type of void in communication with younger family members who were online, and allowed them to communicate with people who they might not otherwise hear from, or who might not otherwise hear from them. Next, it allowed people without computer access in their homes to access the internet. So 3 participants out of the 14 did not have a computer in their homes, but these were the participants who described VMail as most meaningful. And for the 1 out of those 3 participants who used email prior to the study but just didn't own a computer in her home, it allowed her to check email conveniently from her home instead of having to go to another building in the senior center and all the way into the basement, which she preferred not to do and therefore had many built up emails to check. It improved her ability to access her email. And then this last group here, for the other 11 who had a computer in their home but may not have a laptop or may not have a smartphone, VMail improved situational access challenges, like if they were in the hospital or if they went on vacation and still wanted to be able to check their email. So from this deployment, we see that systems like VMail wouldn't be necessary for all seniors. Like I said at the beginning, the term senior or older adult is a very diverse population, but this would be best for older people who face barriers such as lack of computer access or experience, where some need can be addressed. And one particular group of seniors which faces challenges to internet access and experience is older adults with vision impairments. So this statistic here shows that age-related vision loss or macular degeneration affected nearly 11 million older adults in the United States, and this was back in 2009. And this number is projected to double by the year 2050, especially with the rise of what's called the baby boomer population. And it's important to note here that age-related macular degeneration is now affecting people who may have used screen-based technologies like smartphones and tablets, like iPads. They may have been comfortable with using these types of devices for decades. So I'm not even thinking about people who are brand new to using the internet, but if they develop some type of vision impairment, they now need to learn how to use either desktop-based or mobile-based screen readers with its hundreds of keyboard shortcuts. So you're having to relearn how to use technology. And many have chosen, again, to stop using online communities like Facebook because of the cognitive burden of relearning how to use them. Okay? So from learning how seniors are engaging online through blogging and find value in doing so, and learning about the benefits of these IVR-based online communities through VMail, I developed a different system which I call Express. And Express provides a way for older adults to blog and express themselves on Tumblr, but through their landline phone using IVR. And so I'll briefly walk through how this works, but feel free to stop and ask me to clarify any of the details. So first, informed from the VMail work, participants are able to dial in from any phone really. So it doesn't have to be a landline phone. It could be a cell phone that doesn't have internet access. It could be a smartphone. They're able to dial in using a toll-free number. And their phone number is used to authenticate them to the correct account so they don't have to remember passwords, which was a big deal in the observation component of the VMail study. So then they hear a menu where they can choose to either listen to others' new posts, they can listen to their own posts and comments, or they can record a new post. And I put the keypad here because it's important to understand that they're interacting all through keypad input because of prior work which shows that older adults don't necessarily respond well to these very open-ended voice prompts that say, tell me what you want to do today with this system. So all of this is through keypad input. And so if they're listening to posts or comments, it's also important to note that they're hearing the post or comment in the voice of the person who spoke it. So it's a recording. It's not necessarily computer or synthetic voice. It's the recording of the person who published that post or comment. Now, if they want to create a post, they record their message by phone and they press a button to signal the end of the post, and then this post is automatically published as a post on Tumblr, an audio post on Tumblr using Tumblr's API. And this is kind of what the Tumblr site looks like. Someone can press play on the blog and then leave a comment while also seeing the comments of others either on Tumblr or by phone. They'll be displayed. And each participant therefore was given their own blog at the beginning of the study in case they wanted to share their blog posts with family members and friends who weren't participating. And these blogs were also public so that other bloggers who weren't part of the study or weren't related to that person could potentially listen and leave comments. And the benefits of Express are that seniors don't need to purchase an additional device. They all owned phones. They don't have to learn to use a completely unfamiliar system because this is based on a voicemail answering machine-like metaphor where you're pressing 1 to do this or pressing 2 to do this. And it works with an existing online community, making it easy for more connected family members to engage. So after developing Express, I deployed it to seniors who I recruited through support groups and senior centers. All of these were seniors who had some type of vision impairment, and so I deployed it to them for 10 weeks with pre and post interviews, and was able to recruit 7 older adults with vision impairments to participate, whose ages ranged anywhere from 65 all the way to 95. 3 were blind and 4 reported having low vision. But one thing that's important to understand is that they all had some form of acquired vision loss. So none of the 7 were blind from birth. So just a few key findings from patterns in this data was, first, blogging by phone provided opportunities for these participants to meet new people and connect on a deeper level, which they described was challenging to do elsewhere. So one participant said, if I'm walking on the street, you would say, hi, can I help you? That was all you would do. You wouldn't say, hi, how are you? What can I do for you? And so for him and for others, there's this stigma of having a visible impairment where you're walking with a cane, or you might be using a guide dog, and people always assume that he needs help, when really he would just like to have an in-depth conversation with that person. So by using the phone to blog, he felt like he could more easily talk to new people about different topics, and participants valued this kind of depth of conversation. Participants also described how blogging by phone is a safe space to work through disability, and I may have unintentionally violated this safe space. So in the last few weeks of the study, I invited existing sighted older adult bloggers to record posts to give examples of what blogs could sound like and to diversify, the topics of the post a little bit. And participants said, the older adults with vision impairments initially said that they were excited to hear the blog posts of the sighted bloggers. But after listening to their posts, they would say things like, I can get that, meaning the opinions of sighted bloggers. I can get that anywhere. I don't need to have a certain site that's just for the visually challenged to have everybody else in there. So they didn't want sighted people to contribute content on these systems because they feel like they hear the opinion of the majority or sighted people every day, and instead they wanted to connect with people that had similar challenges and experiences. And so these data points helped me to understand the boundaries on community participation in this type of online community. And prior to inviting the guest bloggers, Express was a space that fostered this collective identity where everyone's older and everyone had developed some vision impairment at a point in their lives. And participants described how Express is this meaningful community because of the uniqueness of being able to hear experiences from others with vision impairments, which is something they aren't able to do, particularly for those who were not connected to support groups for people with vision impairments. And lastly, for these participants, the social cues in someone's voice was important. And it was important not only for understanding, but it also helped to give that person an identity. So 3 participants described using voice to help visualize what people were like if they thought someone was rude or friendly. So they were using voice as an identifying feature, which is something that people with vision impairments do. And so it's expected that they're able to do this in online communities. However, this isn't as feasible to do when people with vision impairments are using different screen readers, which all have the same synthetic voice. So one participant said, it's a lot better than reading something off a computer because you really get a better understanding of what they're trying to say. And so this is one of the participants who used the computer almost every day. But she described that this was one of the benefits of using Express to blog than just going to Tumblr, is that you get that human voice component. So this is echoing prior work, which suggests that older adults view phone communication as meaningful because it facilitates real conversation, and it's more intimate and personal than text-based interactions that someone can get online through a screen reader. Through this express deployment, we see that seniors with vision impairments wanted more meaningful ways to connect with new people about disability. And I'm defining meaning in terms of the interaction mode, so thinking about human versus synthetic speech, but also in the depth and the quality of the conversation. So now going back to something that I presented at the beginning, this theory, socio-emotional selectivity theory, we see how each of these studies were showing how seniors aren't just seeking to maintain existing emotionally fulfilling relationships. So the existing older adult bloggers and the blind older adult bloggers using Express liked blogging because it provided opportunities for them to develop new relationships and also learn about community members through these very in-depth blog posts. However, and this is important to note for us as who may be designers and researchers, we may be conflating this idea of perceiving the end of life to be near with the experience of being an older adult. So not all older adults may place themselves on the far end of this x-axis here. So we need to think about that when designing systems to better support older adults and older adults with different disabilities. And in my own work, especially with this last study with Express, I kind of mistook age for perception by creating Express to be an open community that family members and friends could access by creating this kind of Tumblr integration component that no one used. They didn't want their friends and family members to be able to listen to whatever they were posting. Instead, they shared information and they attempted to develop new relationships with people in the Express community. So designing to support lifelong engagement among older adults and older adults with disabilities is about far more than connecting with existing social ties. And just to summarize, going back to these questions, what's meaningful online engagement for older adults? Showing that it's about allowing them to express themselves in depth with the community. They may not be participating in online communities for several reasons. Sure, usability challenges may be there, but there's also this lack of meaning and purpose in these communities. Why do they need to participate in these communities? And lastly, how can technology facilitate meaningful and accessible online interaction? Well, they can provide opportunities for people to make new connections, and as researchers and designers, we may need to rethink the device that someone is using to access the internet. It might not have to be in the form of a laptop or a smartphone. It could be in these more familiar and meaningful form factors. So just to touch briefly on some areas of future work, which I'm always looking for students to help with. One is that the limitation of the Express deployment was that the data logs focused on content or active interaction, comments made, how many times someone dialed in, how many times someone left the post. And I admit I was kind of biased on focusing on these tangible interactions, but in the interviews, people described how one of the main benefits they got from Express was just being able to listen to the experiences of others. So instead of thinking about lurking as this bad thing that people are doing online, what may be some of the benefits of lurking, especially for older adults? Next, thinking about what motivates contribution. So this is hard to read because it's kind of far. It's a comment that Audrey is leaving on a Facebook post of her grandson, Mark, and it says, hi Mark, I was really surprised to see your photos on Facebook and also disappointed. Grow up, grandma. Okay, so thinking about what motivates someone to contribute online. especially in online communities, here, this is a screenshot clearly from Facebook, but especially in online communities where there may not be family members or friends, like in this somewhat anonymous crowd workspace. What would motivate someone to contribute there? That's a bit underexplored. So again, I'm continuing this work by going back to crowd work platforms and investigating these alternative incentive structures to understand how they affect participation. And then I'm also continuing work in the space of voice interfaces to support people with vision impairments by looking at how voice systems can address information needs in these very visual environments, such as in autonomous vehicles. And not only is this an interesting question, but others here in SI have looked at how transportation can provide someone with access to healthcare or different types of resources. So improving in-car experiences may have these longer-term effects on quality of life. And so you might think about how voice-based systems can support people with vision impairments in other highly visual environments like video games or virtual reality, but just thinking about how I can explore that. So side note, this is Tommy Edison. He has his own YouTube blog, which is very popular. It gets thousands, maybe even millions of views. So I would encourage you to go check out his channel. And I am happy to now answer any questions. Thank you. Yes.
So I really like the Express platform. I was wondering, did you do any follow-ups to see whether seniors like continued to use that? Was it like a lasting engagement with Tumblr blogging for them?
So I allowed people to continue using it. This was kind of the last part of my dissertation. So in switching universities, I kind of cut the system off and informed people of that. But what I'm interested in doing is doing perhaps like a larger scale deployment of that, and not necessarily bounding it with this 10 weeks of time, but letting people continue to use it. Because there were people, especially those who lived in the suburbs of, this was done in Evanston, Chicago, so Illinois, those who lived in the suburbs who couldn't get to a lot of the support groups for people with vision impairments, say like downtown Chicago, they wanted to be able to continue using it because they felt like they could meet more people that way. Yeah, there was this one gentleman who kind of said he could turn it into a dating site for him. He said, well, if I meet a woman on there, she could invite me over for dinner, and then I would come. He started to have all these visions of what would happen.
Did they?
No, not in the 10-week time frame at least. Yes.
So the whole idea of life and motivations for the future, did you in the first study have a sense of what people said their motivations were for learning something new at a certain given point of time? Is there more detail on that?
The first study, how people were blogging.
Blogging, yeah. And did you see the variance between the ages?
Not as much. So that interview didn't necessarily focus on motivations to learn new things as much as it focused on motivations to start blogging. Is that what you mean?
I guess one and related to the other as well.
Okay. So it was more around motivations to start blogging, and it, for most people, connected to wanting to have some type of more social presence online, wanting to interact with people more than if they were active on Facebook. They saw that as something that they only used to interact with people who they already were engaged with in these offline forms, so it wasn't as useful for them. So that's why they said, okay, well, I want to talk about other topics, and I want to talk about them in depth, and I know that blogging is a way to do that. Or they would start reading blogs, and someone would encourage them to create their own blog. There was a blogger who others referred to her as the mother of the elder bloggers. Yes. And what would happen is she would create a number, she blogs maybe, I think she creates at least 3 blog posts a day, every day. And people will start to comment on her blogs, and she would recognize people who started to leave comments more than once, and would reach out to them and ask them to start their own blog and kind of encourage them to say, oh, you have some interesting things to talk about. And out of the 20 bloggers who I recruited, I think at least 4 described being recruited by this mother of the elder blogger. So either they realized they had some interesting things to talk about, or they were kind of encouraged by another community member to do that, which I thought was interesting. Yes?
Thanks for the informative talk. Could you explain why you used, was it blog use in measuring existing community engagement in study 1, and why you used amateur for study 2?
So I was trying to look at communities where people, where older adults specifically, were currently engaging online, and those where they may not currently be engaging online, to try to look at the differences and why one was more popular than the other, or just kind of why these types of communities have older adults participating versus not participating. And so that's why I latched on to blogging in study 1, because I saw that there was this very active community of older adults blogging on sites like WordPress or Tumblr. Since this study, Medium has become a popular blogging platform. The study was done a couple years ago. And then in terms of crowd work, there have been a lot of studies and reports showing how crowd work platforms are not diverse, where a lot of researchers may be using sites like Mechanical Turk to reach a broad audience of people, and people kind of do these exposés on Mechanical Turk to show that everyone is similar. Everyone's from the same age group, everyone's from the same countries, maybe, can't recall, but maybe even economic status, like the same types of people are completing crowd work. And so that led me to look into how seniors were participating, if they were participating, and finding out that they were not. So that's why I kind of chose those 2 types of communities to look at engagement in these very different ways.
So one of the things that occurred to me, especially the female thing with adults who previously had vision, it's the sort of, I'm just curious your thoughts about like how you design systems to support those sorts of transitions, because they're already familiar with technology and familiar with using technology in a different way, and now because of a new sort of change in their life circumstances, they have to learn something entirely new. It seems like there's a lot of challenges with doing that, and I'm curious if you can just kind of reflect more broadly on that kind of problem.
Yeah, so when doing the female studies, so the female studies was with sighted older adults. And in that study, there were a lot of people who were saying, this would be more useful for me if I lost my vision, or this is more useful for my neighbor who was blind. You should really approach her for this study. And so thinking about that, I wasn't sure, because my work had been in this space of older adults, not necessarily older adults with vision impairments. I wasn't sure what technologies or what systems that older adults with vision impairments were using. So what I didn't present here was also a set of interviews with older adults with vision impairments to just understand what their challenges were in that transition, what technologies they found to be more usable for them at this stage in their lives, and why. And that's kind of why I continue to use the phone with older adults without vision impairments and older adults with vision impairments, because it seems like people were more comfortable with using technology that they could still use as a blind or low vision person without having to relearn anything. So I think trying to just think about, if you're designing for transitions, thinking about what technologies people aren't intimidated to use or that they don't have to relearn to use, and then seeing how the internet or whatever you're interested in can be embedded into that technology, as opposed to kind of forcing people to learn new things. And so this was something that was brought up where in the blind community it's encouraged to learn Braille, it's encouraged to learn to use screen readers, but for people who have an acquired vision loss, that it's just very intimidating for them to do, because a lot of these kind of instructional materials and a lot of these classes are for younger people, not necessarily for someone of their age. It's challenging though.
Yeah.
Yes?
I have a very mechanical question. Did these users have the keypad separate from the handset?
Yeah. Yes.
So most phones these days don't. It's, when you hold it up to your ear, you can't press buttons.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood that. They all had tactile buttons on their
You might
phone.
not even remember the old days when we had phones where you had a handset.
We had to
and
pick it up from the base,
We still have
right?
them in our office, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did these people in their homes? Because it makes a huge difference when you're trying to press the buttons, whether you have to take the...
People didn't describe that being a huge difference. There was a mix. Out of the 7, there was a mix of people who had those attached to a base and those who had it within the phone themselves. But one thing that they all had in common was that these were buttons that they could feel the number. And so what was described was the 5 button will normally have a dot so that they can easily navigate from the 5 to press the correct button. So that was the workaround that they described. They didn't necessarily describe the difference between 2 types of phones.
Okay. Let's thank Robin again.